Hello, everyone, and welcome to our first episode of World Building. Tonight, we are going to be taking a look at the world of After the Fall, an upcoming show here on Scryer I am Ryan Johnson. I am one of the game masters here on Scryer I run the titular show, Scryer on Wednesday nights at 7:30 Central, which is a very different type of world than what we'll be exploring tonight. The channel was founded around this idea of sort of magical reality television, and our first show, The World's Greatest Dungeon, the alternative name for Scryer main show on Wednesday night, sort of centers around that, picking pieces from The Greatest Race and Survivor as a team competes to survive and make it home with 1,000,000 gold coins. We are also having an upcoming show called Dungeon Sphere, which takes place in the same universe. Now, generally, we want to try to continue to develop stuff that's in-universe, but this idea popped into my head, and I've been playing around with it so much, and having people play test it with me quite a bit over the last half a year or so. So we're going to make the show. I think it'll be a lot of fun, and I hope that by the end of the evening you are also very excited for it. First off, welcome everybody in chat. I do have the chat window up, so do feel free to send me a message. If you've got questions, I'm going to try to answer them as much as possible. And oh, hello, Scooby! How are you doing tonight? I would have thought you'd be playing The Forest or Valheim. I'm glad you could take some time to join us here for this. I'm going to go ahead and skip this one. This is a little off theme. There we go. That's better. Not too bad. All right. Glad to hear it. All right. So, couple of things to know about this world. After the Fall takes place in our world with some slight changes and about 10 years in the future. Nope, not that one either. Tonight's music genres are cinematic, country, and rock, because we're kind of doing this rural setting. I felt like it was appropriate. And then we've got happy, dramatic, and inspirational for our moods. So we may end up having to skip more songs, but we'll just kind of roll with it. So, the world that we're in, like I said, is our world. It's set in rural Minnesota in the year 2030. Now, unfortunately for this world that we're developing... Oh, Brianna says, not sure the music's coming through. Let's go ahead and turn it up just a touch here. Is that any better? Maybe? There it is. Okay, good. Can you still hear me? Barely hear it. Alright, turn it up just a little bit more there. As long as you can still hear me, I guess that's what's important there. So like I said, 2030, the world in 2020 took a dramatic turn from our own world. In December of 2020, the world as we knew it ended. And it wasn't through warfare or terrorist attack or a virus, although there was a virus. It ended in the blink of an eye as magic returned to the world. So, in addition to all this wild magic running amok across the planet, and magical creatures, dragons, mermaids, and stuff returning to the world, people also changed. About 60% of the global population turned from human into different fantasy races, which threw things into a bit of chaos. In addition to this, technology that we have today, like cameras, GPS, satellites, all sorts of fun stuff, stopped working correctly. That includes combustion. Guns still work, but they're not as effective. So, combustion engines for cars, things of that nature, airplanes, it just kind of doesn't work quite right. It's still kind of there, but it takes a lot more energy to actually get it going. So they're not as efficient, they're not as effective. And well, I lost my train of thought. This music in my ears is really, really loud, so I'm just going to go ahead and unplug these. As long as you can hear them, I guess we're fine. So with that in mind, civilization didn't really survive. There are still a whole bunch of pockets. Oh, no, Scooby, it's okay. The music is there to set the mood, and I don't want a whole lot of dead air for when I stop talking. So there's still pockets of civilization out there, and one of them is the town in which our characters are going to start, called Newcastle, Minnesota. Now, Newcastle was founded the first year after the fall, and it was founded in part because it was kind of, it grew up around a community that was already there. A whole bunch of people kind of out in the country started taking in refugees who were fleeing the Twin Cities because there was no food in the Twin Cities. And because this happened in December, there aren't crops in the field or anything. The town was unfortunately quickly overrun by these refugees, to the point where they started pushing them away. They founded their first military outpost as a town on an overpass along the interstate to turn people, instead of towards their town, to the west to head to Fargo. Now, Fargo is actually one of the few centers of civilization in the Midwest that's still around. However, Fargo is now controlled and ruled over by a gold dragon, who in the first year after the fall landed there and figured, you know what, this is a pretty chill place. I'm going to live here now. Newcastle, Minnesota, changed its name, and after 10 years of constant struggle and strife, they've sort of stabilized a little bit more. The town is self-governed, and it's part of the Eastern Minnesota Protective Alliance. There are 3 members of this alliance. Newcastle is kind of in the center, located along the Mississippi River, a little bit more towards the headwaters. The other surviving center of civilization is north of them, and that is Duluth, or the Duluth Union. Duluth managed to hang on. They're a free state, and they have access to trade with Canada and parts beyond through the Great Lakes. Further downriver, the southern end of the Protective Alliance is Fort Snelling, which is not much, because that is all that's really left of the Twin Cities. Things did not go well here. Between rampaging monsters, wild magic, people who didn't know how to control their magic, completely burning places down and causing earthquakes and all sorts of mayhem, it just didn't really survive. People fled, especially because, again, they couldn't get any food. The fort was occupied by a group who is very militaristic, and they dress and act as if they were chivalric knights. So, full plate armor, they ride horses, they have pages and squires, they follow the code of chivalry, and they sort of patrol little settlements within what's left of the Twin Cities. But there's not really good farming land. There's not enough people to really grow crops for everybody, so they import a lot of their food from Newcastle. Newcastle itself is the main town, and then it's surrounded by little villages that each kind of has its own specialty. One that sort of focuses on livestock, one is mining, one is agriculture, one is actually the barges that ship things north and south along the river. And of course, one is training the castle guard, the sort of, not knights, but militia for the area. So we'll be coming into this story in Newcastle 10 years after the fall, and it's going to be focused on the children who grew up in this world. So everybody's going to be 18 to 20 years old, and one of the defining features of Newcastle is the fact that they have a school. They have a combined school for all kids that if you're 10, you gotta go to school, and you go until you're 18, you graduate, and then you kind of enter the workforce. That's not to say you don't work ahead of that. A lot of the kids end up apprenticing, and if they have parents that have a certain special set of skills, usually their parents are passing those skills on to them to sort of maintain their status within the community. Because there's the people who are in charge, there's the merchant class, then there's sort of the laborers and the farmers. And while it's not as defined of a split as you might expect, it is definitely still there. Now, again, I do want to mention, if you have any questions coming up throughout any of this, I'm going to just be blathering quite a bit here if you don't ask any. We will definitely answer those. And I'm also looking for suggestions on how to make this setting better. Now, one of the things I will say is that we are not going to be using Dungeons & Dragons for this game. We are going to be using the Cypher system by Monte Cook Games. The Cypher system is sort of a universal role-playing system where you decide what genre you're playing. Everything kind of mechanically works the same, and it's very story-driven. The storyteller, me, won't actually ever roll any dice. It's always the players rolling, whether they're attacking or defending, and there's only 6 core stats. Everything else is decided by abilities and narrative. So like I said, the kids are going to be growing up in this sort of post-apocalyptic world. They remember the old world, but they don't really remember it. Like, it's sort of semi-conscious, semi-dream state for them, as all they've known for the last 10 years is the New World. And the New World has not been pleasant. Starting in the first few years after the fall, Newcastle underwent a period of civil war where the mayor of the town, original town, decided that, you know what, I think I'm in charge now, and wasn't going to run for election anymore. Hey, Killer, welcome. Thanks for the raid. Party of 1. Is it just you, Killer, or who else is coming with you? The town was sort of semi-saved as a party of adventurers from the Twin Cities, or what was left of it. It would be sad, yes. Came in and overthrew the established... There we go, Scooby came with you. Overthrew the mayor, saved the town, established a town council, and just in time, too, because that's when the goblins and the gnolls started to attack. There wasn't a lot of livestock left in those times, and crops were pretty sparse. The goblins and the gnolls began capturing people from Newcastle and eating them. So the town banded together and managed to push back the goblins and the gnolls into the wilderness and kind of rout them. For the last 5 years or so, it hasn't been a huge problem like it was right away, but every once in a while the goblins will return and sack a settlement and carry people off. And then the militia has to get together and chase them down and try to rescue their people. What is difficult about that is the goblins usually have firearms, and the militia does not have many. However, that's neither here nor there. The last 5 years of history have been getting progressively better. Let's see, so magic returned, then did random people turn into goblins and orcs and elves and such? And as a matter of fact, yes they did. All of the fantasy races that are humanoid were transformed humans. 60%, thank you Scooby. So there's still a fair amount of humans left, but now we've got elves, now we've got goblins, now we've got orcs, we've got all sorts of different creatures that are inhabiting this world. And in those initial moments after the change, it was pretty crazy. I said it right at the beginning, so I should probably reiterate certain points and stuff throughout. Yeah, it was very chaotic, and yeah, we were originally going to do this game with Dungeons & Dragons and use a specialized character creation system where people actually picked, okay, my parents were an elf and a satyr, and kind of picking pieces from each. Thank you very much, Legolas. I will turn that down slightly. There we go. Hopefully that's better. I should probably have realized that, as I can actually hear it through the earbuds there, which are about 2 feet away from me. Where was I? Scooby would totally be a dwarf. There you go. And there's not much difference between the different races. We got Legolas, who's a hobbit there. There's absolutely halflings or hobbits inhabiting the world, gnomes, dragonborn, tieflings, Aasimar. Basically all the different fantasy races you can possibly think of are represented in different areas. Within the Newcastle region, it's primarily humans, halflings, dwarves, and fate befalls, glad you're happy about the gnomes. And elves. In fact, there was a recent addition to this world, or to this community, with a bunch of elven refugees who have descended down from Toronto, and they stopped in Duluth, and Duluth said, nah, you can't stay here, you gotta keep going. And they got adopted into the Newcastle community about 2 years ago. These elves say that Toronto was doing okay after the fall, but then the entirety of northern Canada is apparently just lousy with white dragons. Just everywhere. And the dragons came and sacked the city and took everything, and they had to flee. So, there's sort of an elven enclave of Canadian elves hanging out in town, and it's a little tense, because we've got this very insular Midwestern community, and all of a sudden there's this big group of outsiders who are influencing policy, and there's some concerns that they're corrupting the kids. Thank you, Killer. I'm glad you enjoy them. I am really looking forward to role-playing them. I think it'll be a lot of fun. There's another group in town that's also quite fun, called the Knights of Pratchett, as in Terry Pratchett. So there's I don't know if it's an urban legend or actual fact. I'd like to think it's actual fact. That Terry Pratchett, when he was knighted by the Queen, decided that he was going to forge his own sword for the knighting. And he found a meteorite of very, very pure metal, learned how to forge it. Finally, after he kind of gotten down the smithing of it and everything, worked the metal into a sword and had the Queen knight him with that sword. So we have a group of Brits who have crossed the Atlantic and come to the Midwest searching out this sword, because, as the legend goes, Terry Pratchett, once he had forged the sword and been knighted, he took it and he threw it into a lake somewhere in England. And that was the end of it. Well, this group, the Knights of Pratchett, believe that isn't actually the full story. They believe that Sir Terry Pratchett gave the sword to Neil Gaiman, his friend, who lived in this area at the time, and had Neil Gaiman throw it into one of Minnesota's 10,000 lakes. And they believe that lake is somewhere in the Newcastle region. So they have traversed the ocean, crossing it from England all the way to the New England area, traversed thousands of miles of wasteland in different communities and attacks to get to the Newcastle region, and now are going from lake to lake, dredging it, trying to find the sword of Terry Pratchett. So, I'm looking forward to playing them too. I'm trying to brush up on my Pratchettisms and read more of The Watch, because I think that will play into things quite a bit there. Wyatt Anderson, thank you very much for joining us tonight. I hope that you're enjoying this so far. For those of you who are just jumping on, we're talking about an upcoming series here on Scryer Vision called After the Fall, which will take place in sort of a post-apocalyptic world that is just a little removed from our own, as it is set in rural Minnesota in the year 2030, after a magical apocalypse. Once again, magic returned to the world in a blink of an eye, and people turned into different fantasy creatures. Magic came back to the world. We've now got wizards and dragons, and yeah, it's a little weird. It's a little different. Again, I am taking any suggestions for improvements, answering any questions that you have. I have used the Spectacular Settlements from Nord Games to sort of flesh out this world a little bit, but there's always room for more. Little shops that it could be in the town, little wild magic quirks, local legends. Happy to take any and all suggestions that you might have, or any questions that you might have. Once again, we will not be using Dungeons & Dragons for this game. We'll be using the Cypher system from Monty Cook Games. That's good. Okay. Were animals and pets affected by the change? They were, in fact. A lot of animals actually turned into different fantasy creatures. So, horses, some of them became unicorns, but then again, so did rhinos. It's difficult to tell just how the change affected a lot of them. It was definitely a lower percentage than the human population. There's still dogs, but now we also have things like dire wolves, and I don't think we can use bullets because I'm pretty sure that is a Dungeons & Dragons specific creature, just like a Mind Flayer or Beholder, though they probably still very much exist. But good question. Very good. Thank you very much, Scooby. Direwolves. So winter wolves too. Yes, absolutely, Legolas. There are winter wolves aplenty, and there are still the same seasons. This is still Minnesota. So when the snow falls, it actually has gotten a lot heavier. Winter's a lot more intense. Summer's a lot lighter. It doesn't last for quite as long. So during the cold months, creatures from further north, including white dragons, sometimes migrate down and then retreat when the spring and summer comes, which has been a bit of a problem for the Newcastle region. Now, as the name would suggest, Newcastle intends to build a castle eventually. They haven't yet. Oh, did any magic of any kind exist in the world prior to the change? Maybe people were hiding it. That's a good question, and the knowledge that the characters will have starting in the game is no. There was technology. There was some really high-tech stuff that just no longer works, and you know, adults talk about it all the time, and a certain segment of the adult surviving population carries around their cell phones still. They don't really work unless you're both within a mile of the same cell tower, and smartphones in particular, forget it. They're basically junk. Nokia phones, on the other hand, those things still work, and they are highly sought after by scavengers. But good question. There may have been magic users prior to the fall, but we're not sure. Brianna, glad you're here. Yes, we have a Discord. What about bag phones? Yes, bag phones and like old school 1980s, early 90s car phones. I'm gonna say they work because I don't believe they were satellite based. They were. They still had towers that they worked off of. I know I missed a lot for this, but where did the magic come from? Not at all. I did not actually reveal that, and I'm not sure I should reveal that. Yes, the 2020 apocalypse. December 2020, that was the end, the last final apocalypse of 2020 was magic returning to the world. And it just, boom, blink of an eye. Do you want to know how the magic came back? Or do you want that to be a surprise in the series? Yes, world go boom. And to touch back on what Brianna was saying there, we do have a Discord. The Discord, you follow that link, join us, hit the thumbs up button on the Terms of Service page, and then join us for all this sort of stuff. We're doing programming updates on there. You can also follow us on Twitter for programming updates and for news and stuff. But you also get to interact with the cast and find out just how crazy we all are by joining our Discord. It's a lot of fun. I might be biased. So if you want it to be a surprise, I'm not entirely sure in the first series of this they'll actually figure out what impacted the world, but I would like to get to it eventually because there is a reason that it came back. And yes, Scooby is correct. We are in fact crazy, but in a good way. Oh, and thank you for the Twitter link there too. Give us a follow. And hey, if you're new here, give us a follow on Twitch too. We appreciate all follows. It is always a good time to have more people joining us for our games. So, what other questions do people have? Or what suggestions do people have? If you don't have any, we'll continue to talk and blather on about the town itself and then go on to the villages surrounding it. Left the tea bag in too long. So, the town is governed by a town council. There's no more mayor of any sort. The council is made up of 3 people from town, and then 1 person from each of the villages. If anything is left of St. Cloud, it should be an oasis. Oh, I kind of like that. Like it's a little trade hub. Because in addition to the more civilized communities, we do have Fargo. Further down the river, St. Louis actually survived. I feel like the high school mascot costumes might now roam in bands of terrifying beasts. I like that. Yes, anybody who was in a mascot costume at the time of the change actually turned into the mascot. What's the one from Philadelphia that is like kind of kooky? I forget. I'm gonna turn down this music a little bit more because I can definitely hear it still. Yes, intelligent. Oh, and there's lots of awakened creatures and stuff too. But yeah, the further down the river, there's also Gritty. Yes, thank you, Wyatt. Gritty, he is still in Philadelphia, and oh my gosh, you're right. There, you know what? We're gonna say that people were just dressing up in those costumes anyways for fun. So yeah, no, they exist. Because rule of cool trumps reality every day of the week. Maybe in this world, they actually were still doing live sports. Not bright, but they were. No one wears those for fun. Yes, they are rather unpleasant. Maybe there was a public appearance or something. Thank you, Wyatt. So, further down the river, once more, St. Louis still exists, but there's a lot of people who believe that St. Louis is actually just evil wizards, and they're trying to turn the St. Louis Arch into some sort of gateway of some sort. Whether or not that's true, it's hundreds of miles away, and the world has become so much bigger as a result of us not having rapid communications and rapid transit, and the highways essentially, over time, getting destroyed. Actually, on that note, Wisconsin didn't fare too well after the fall and has gone a bit wild. They're just across the river, but nobody really goes into Wisconsin because it became a very isolated and insular community, and a lot of them sort of devolved into just a raider mentality. So they call them the Whiskey Men. WISC-Y, Whisk Ye Men. Who constantly... Oh, haha, Scooby. constantly raid across the river and attack people that are coming across for trade. So nobody goes into Wisconsin from the Eastern Minnesota Protective Alliance. They just stay on their side. The Wisconsinites kind of stay on their side. And there's a bit of a weird peace. Now, that being said, unfortunately, let's see, they had all the fireworks, though. That's why nobody goes over there. Well, the fireworks definitely still work, weirdly. Combustion engines, not so much. Firearms, F for the cheese. Yes, F in the chat for cheese. We've got Minnesota cheeses, though. So that's good. I like Ellsworth cheese myself. I don't know. I grew up in Wisconsin. Big cheese guy. I imagine that Upper Peninsula is just the Whiskey Men, but even more insane. The Duluth Union has to deal with them more than the Newcastle region. So if the players end up in Duluth, there might be some sort of quest that they could pick up to go explore the Upper Peninsula. Maybe there's a mine or something that they want to look into. Yes, Whiskey Men with a much thicker accent. So St. Louis may be evil, may not be, we don't know. Further down the river, apparently New Orleans survived. But aside from that, there's not a lot of news trickling in. We know that there's some civilization still left in England because of the Knights of Pratchett arriving in Newcastle. But otherwise, I mean, we don't know anything about New York. We don't know anything about Florida, California. Yes, New Orleans definitely survived, and there's definitely voodoo. Okay, thank you, Legolas, for that. They probably won't, though, because, again, most of civilization got destroyed. But there are probably villages, towns, and possibly even cities in the south. New Orleans, of course, being one of them. St. Cloud being sort of a trade oasis makes sense because a lot of the Great Plains actually got reclaimed by Native American tribes, sort of banding together and taking in some refugees and adopting them as long as they adopted their culture. Fargo, definitely still its own thing. Like I said, controlled by a golden dragon. Iowa still exists and is actually doing quite well for itself. It is known as, checking my notes here, the Iowa Confederacy. So maybe Iowa will rise again there, Legolas. Essentially, each independent farmer took in a bunch of refugees and is sort of the lord of their own little land in Iowa and has a voice in their Senate. Yeah, good for Iowa. Good for them. They're doing okay. Otherwise, there's bands of orcs that are roaming the countryside and are largely peaceful unless, they have to move a herd or something through your area and you happen to attack them. That's generally frowned upon in orc culture. The main thing to note is that we're not playing it where there's specifically evil races. Just because you're tieflings or orcs or goblins, you're not necessarily evil. Goblin cannibals, they're evil. Crazy whiskey men, definitely evil. So at the start of the campaign, how long has Newcastle existed? 10 years. They were formed immediately after during the first year or year zero after the fall. The villages have sort of sprouted up in the meantime after that. The first one was, I'm going to look at my notes here, make sure I get this right, Pine Guard. How big is it? Approximately. There's about 2,000 people living within the greater region of Newcastle. Most of them are inside Newcastle town itself. It is the only town in the area that has a wall running all the way around it and protecting the people in it. It is still pretty much a small town, though. Everybody kind of knows each other. Things are very on top of each other in town, though there's not a building bigger than, I think, 3 stories, and that's like the town hall and the Lutheran church are the 2 biggest buildings in town. And Lutheran Christianity is the primary religion of the town. seeing as it is rural Minnesota. What is used as currency? Excellent question. The American dollar, still used as currency. However, they do stamp it for the Newcastle area or for the Duluth Union. They just needed something that was currently available, and they didn't have the resources to mint or make their own money. And people already had this, so they just kind of transitioned into it. That being said, that is fairly recent. Right after the fall, barter economy was definitely all that was going on. People were trading with each other. You grew crops, you traded those for other crops or for meats or for things that you needed to fix up your house. So that was fun. The town itself grows a lot of crops. Canadian money, yes, that is actually, they traded in the Canadian money when they arrived for Newcastle. What did they do for new money? Like, eventually wouldn't money wear out, get ruined, especially the bills? That is absolutely correct. So the town council actually has a vault that they're hoarding all of this cash in, and when stuff is kind of wearing out, they'll cycle it out, just like the United States Mint currently does. But when they cycle it out, they pop the stamp on there for Newcastle, and now it's a Newcastle bill. That being said, there is a criminal syndicate within the town that does like to slowly introduce new money into circulation and has effectively copied the official stamp and seal of Newcastle. The crime syndicate is called The Family. I know, super creative, but what can you do? I got all this other stuff going on. I can't think of everything. If you have a better name for the crime syndicate in Newcastle, I would love to hear it. The family engages in a bit of criminal mischief. There's not a lot of crime to really speak of in the area, as everybody is still very much dependent on each other for survival. They do counterfeit money. They do hire scavenging teams to go break into old banks in towns that they think there's still some cash in them and bring back valuables. And they run moonshine. They have stills across the river in Wisconsin, and on the night of the new moon, they actually import it in and distribute it around. It is not necessarily illegal to have moonshine in Newcastle, but there's a tax on the creation of it, so they're sort of getting around the tax, the whiskey tax. Importing their whiskey from whiskey. All right. People are posting all these questions, and I'm loving it. If you have any more, please do post them in the chat here. Once again, I probably should have put my name on the overlay too here. My name is Ryan Johnson. I'm going to be the storyteller for this game called After the Fall, which will be starting on Scryer Vision very soon. We've closed casting at this point. We're working out who we're going to be inviting onto our cast, onto the channel. And then it's just a hop, skip, and a jump to character art, character creation, and getting going. The show is going to take place in 2030, 10 years after the world ended in a magical apocalypse, with magic returning to the world, and about 60% of the human population turning into various fantasy races, and about 40% of the animal population turning in to various fantasy creatures. You've got a couple more questions here. What is the level of technology during the event? Was it the same before the fall, or has it changed? It has changed significantly. And I see Legolas is asking, can people still apply to be on it? Unfortunately, no. Applications are closed at this time for this season of it. If you follow us on Twitter, we definitely do post casting calls every so often, and we have about a dozen different show ideas that we want to make happen. Some of them are Dungeons and Dragons, some of them are other systems. So if you're interested in being on a streaming show, you do not need to have experience for it. And you don't even really need that good of a camera or microphone when you're starting out. We are happy to take new people on. So going back to Killer's question, what is the level of technology during the event? So technology in 2020, exactly what we have today. minus the COVID vaccine, I suppose. That's a scary thought. The big changes, like I said, combustion doesn't work quite right. So firearms, combustion engines, while they still work, unfortunately they're not as powerful. So they plod along. You could take a car from one coast to the other theoretically, but it would probably take 3 or 4 times as long because you don't get as much horsepower out of an engine and out of a single tank of gas. And gasoline is another problem. Newcastle's working on its own refinery, but right now they're dependent on oil and gas imports from Duluth. So that's fun for them. But they send a lot of food up to Duluth, and they're about to open a lumber mill. That's actually going to be a big part of the first part of the story, the creation of this lumber mill in town. And we'll get back to that in a second. Cell phones still work, as long as they're older model cell phones, not smartphones. Computers don't work really as well. They're super slow. They lose their memory all the time. Some people think the computers might actually be sentient. There's a little cult in one of the villages that worships old world technology. Not like to the level if they have an unexploded A-bomb in the basement of a cellar or something. It is definitely not quite that crazy. But they believe that there's some sort of massive AI that's causing all of this. Whether or not that's true remains to be seen. That's why they're a cult. Other technology. The town is electrified. That is one thing that sets it apart, and the other members of the Eastern Minnesota Protective Alliance apart from some other communities. Now, Fargo, bunch of Iowa, New Orleans, St. Louis, they're definitely still electrified too, but by different means. The Newcastle region has wind turbines that are constantly spinning. They have a specific branch of the militia who's in charge of maintaining these wind turbines. It doesn't generate as much power as they would like, but everybody can have lights. There's street lights in town. There's one street light in each of the villages because they're a little small. But there's still power. Landline telephones are actually working on getting landlines reestablished all over the place so that people can call each other and they can have rapid deployment of the militia. If one village gets attacked, they don't have to wait to see the smoke rising or anything. But in the meantime, they've actually worked out I'm stealing this from one of my favorite book series called The Emberverse, where they are using, it's called heliograph, where they have hot air balloons, they send those up, and they use mirrors and light to relay messages over long distances to other hot air balloons that then send the messages down to the village. So there's sort of a mixture of old world and new world technology. And then there are some places in town that have been affected by wild magic. There's a a stable in Newcastle that has a digital screen that is not plugged in their window, that they've tried to remove it and they can't. They've tried to get it to change what it's playing and it can't. It's some sort of weird mimetic video playing over and over and over again. And people have kind of come to know this really fancy stable by that mimetic sign that they just can't seem to get rid of. So, other questions? I think I covered most parts of technology. Airplanes don't really work anymore. Hot air balloons, blimps do. Yeah. All right. So, like I was saying, town is governed by a town council. 3 people from the town itself are on the council, and then 1 representative from each of the villages. These people make all the major decisions for the Newcastle area. And because of that, the Newcastle Castle project, which has its foundations laid, has not been a priority for about 7 years now. The original dictatorial mayor, who was going to be the new king of the area, he thought, was actually much more invested in creating this castle as an enduring legacy to his greatness. So that was fun. The council members are elected by popular vote. Each village gets to hold their own vote on an annual basis during the summer. I believe actually July 4th. They get to pick their leaders on the old Independence Day. There is taxes that people got to pay, but usually they can either pay that in currency or in kind by providing food and stuff for a general reserve. And the town definitely takes care of their people. Term limits. Excellent question. So you can get voted out at any time by your constituents if they don't think you're doing a good job. But there is no solid term limit, except for the fact that the council picks a speaker on an annual basis. From all the council members, once the election is finished on the 4th, a few days later, they meet for the first time. They pick one of their members to be the speaker, and that person serves for a single year and then can no longer be part of the town council. They are kicked out, and they cannot serve in that capacity anymore. The council members, especially here early on, it's still only 10 years after the fall, and it's really only about 7 years since the council was established. So most of the people are influential members within the community, but they aren't necessarily career politicians. You have farmers, you have laborers, you've got business owners, all of whom are contributing to trying to make the town a better place. So, but very good question, Mika. Appreciate that. There are politics in this community, and the thing that sets apart the different political parties isn't so much fiscal policy or that sort of ideology. It's two things. How do they feel about magic, and how do they feel about technology? Some of the parties want to embrace old world technology and completely distrust magic, think that it shouldn't be used, that anybody who can use magic should be run out of town. And fortunately, that party doesn't have a lot of power in the community. Magic users in other communities, they get run out of town or they get killed. Because you never know when a young wizard is actually going to accidentally going to set a barn on fire and destroy all the crops or livestock. It's a danger, it's a risk, and some communities aren't willing to take it. The biggest faction is kind of pro working technology and pro magic. That seems to be the predominant attitude within town. And I believe that is called the, the Frontier Party? Nope, they're anti-magic and anti-technology. And I believed one of these must have caused the fall. Stand-up party called the Pragmatist, pro-magic, pro-technology. So, yeah, the stand-up party. And then we've got the New World Party, who believes we should just get rid of all technology and just rely on magic for everything now. Law and order. So Newcastle has the Castle Guard, which is the local militia. They serve both as a sort of military for the region, but also for the police within the town. So if you become part of the Castle Guard, you're essentially law enforcement and part of the fighting corps for the area. They have a whole bunch of different subdivisions that they have to deal with. Some deal with magic, some deal with technological preservation. Some are rangers who patrol the areas between the villages and make sure there's no goblin settlements being created that we don't know about. Any sorts of sports or competition between the communities? Yes, actually. So I've run this system a few times, this setting, for different groups. Holler for all my playtesters who are in the chat right now. I appreciate you. And a couple of them, I was kind of told, I told them that they could be whatever character they wanted within this world and just go crazy, come up with something really cool. And a couple of them wanted to be sort of the all-star athlete who in our world would probably be getting a full ride to some Ivy League school because they were just really awesome at football or something. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. There's not really a whole lot of sports, though, because Newcastle's very isolated. I'm like, you know what? No. The football team, once a year, plays against the Duluth Union football team. There's not like a semi-pro team or anything like that. It's just the school kids playing, and there's a few other sports that happen at the same time, sort of an Olympic-style thing. Unfortunately, Fort Snelling doesn't participate because they have a lot more things they have to worry about and don't really have the time and energy to devote to sports. But, yes, the Newcastle... Oh, gosh, what did we call them? What is the sports team? Education. So there were several sports teams before what's known as Fortuna's Rebellion. The Eagles, the Bulldogs, the Tigers, and these kind of created this tribal mentality within the community based around which sports team you either supported or were a part of, that were exacerbated when one of the villages rebelled against Newcastle. So after that, they have formed just one team called the Newcastle Defenders. And Tall Tony B, glad you're watching too. Yes, dodgeball definitely exists, and gym class definitely exists, and you gotta play some dodgeball. There's also militia training for all members of the community is compulsory, so anybody over the age of 15 has to be trained in crossbow, pike, and sword. Whether or not you're any good at it is entirely up to you building your character, but everybody gets that. Archery dodgeball. Ooh. Okay, I'm interested. Tell me more. What is archery dodgeball? What does that look like? Do you have the dodgeballs on the ends of arrows? Or do you're like shooting arrows at each other that have blunted ends? Because that sounds dangerous, but also awesome. You have to dodge arrows. If you can dodge a ball, you can dodge an arrow. Well, yeah, maybe. It's a real thing. Why aren't we doing that right now? Oh, right, COVID. Okay. That seems like a really cool idea, and I definitely want to use that. Thank you very much. I feel like that's probably a really popular sport for the kids attending the school. Maybe it's something that they like participate in that the adults don't know about, or they think they don't know about it. Because youth culture is definitely a thing within the community too. Axe throwing, definitely that too. Yeah, there's a Ren Fair every year. They just call it the fair. So the kids actually have an old rundown water park outside of the town that sort of serves as a gathering spot where once a month usually they get together for parties. They think that the school and the adults don't know about it, but they do. They just kind of make sure the area is cleared ahead of time, and are essentially giving the kids a sense of agency and allowing a structured rebellion that hopefully, a manticore is not going to land in the middle of their party some night and just, mess everything up. Yeah, so... so sports, definitely a thing. There's also a lot of more of the medieval sports, like the axe throwing, the archery and stuff. There's more regular competitions for that. And there is definitely 2 big sporting events of that nature on an annual basis. July 4th, there is one in Newcastle itself in the fairgrounds, where dragon training. Dragons are really tough to train in this world. They're more about destroying stuff and kind of ruling over the little tiny mortals than they are being trained and being friendly. Yeah. The other big sports thing on a yearly basis is at one of the villages. Let's see, not Jorgensen, not Dayton, Fairbank. So Fairbank Fair happens in the spring, around late April, early May. Okay, direwolf training and agility. Oh, that would be fun. Actually, I think it's just kind of like an agility course, and eventually somebody just started bringing their direwolf and just wrecking the course. So yeah, the Fairbank Fair takes place at Fairbank, which is one of the villages that's focused on river trade. Agility course for humans being chased by dire wolves. The running of the dire wolves. Pamplona hasn't got anything on that. You don't get gored, you get eaten. Yes, exactly. So let's see. We're talking about Law and Order. We talked a little bit about crime. If anybody, again, has any suggestions for a different name for this crime syndicate, thank you, Meika. We will definitely be running the show within the next couple months. We will be streaming the character creation process in addition to the game itself. And if you've never seen Cypher character creation process, it's very different from Dungeons and Dragons and a lot of the 5th edition role-playing games. So we talked a little bit about crime. The family controls all crime. And again, if you have a better suggestion for the crime syndicate's name, I'm all ears. They do a little bit of drug running, but not a lot of it. The primary drug in the area is opium. One of the towns known as Breadseed, which has kind of two things going on with it, but their big thing is that they grow poppies to create opium for morphine, and there's some people who are turning it into more addictive substances. Let's see. Military, we talked a little bit about. There's the Scout Division, the Engineering Division, the Unknown Division, who is in charge of magic. Collection Division, which collects taxes, and that is the most dangerous one to be part of, because people do not like paying their taxes. And then the Marine Division, which actually is kind of interesting to talk about that one. The primary artery for trade isn't along roads in this day and age. It's gone back to the rivers. So they have direct access via the river network up to what is it called? Headwater, which is a town that then leads over road to the Duluth Union. Heavily patrolled, very militaristic town, but it's the main trade town at the headwaters of the Mississippi. Going the other way, they've got access all the way downriver to the Twin Cities, where they connect up with Fort Snelling and do their trade there. So Fairbank, one of the first towns founded after the fall as part of the Newcastle Greater Region, is in charge of building boats and getting stuff up and down river. Well, we have river pirates, of course. You've got raids from people on the Wisconsin side of the river. You've got river monsters. There's even rumors of mermaids in the river, and there's a lot going on along that artery. The sailors can't defend it on their own, so they actually do have a group of the Castle Guard that are kind of more marine-based, that defend the ships and staff the various checkpoints along the river to resupply and make sure everything's good. So, what do we got here? What is the syndicate like? Just trying to think of a good name right now. So they are, and is the syndicate affecting more than one town? They are just the Newcastle region. So they are throughout the Newcastle region, and I'm sure they would love to get into the Duluth Union. They don't really care about Fort Snelling because that's basically just a ruin. But if they can get into the Duluth Union, they'll have control of a much bigger area for importing and exporting goods. But just for now, they are just in Newcastle. They are pretty unmenacing by comparison to modern crime syndicates. Like I said, there's not a lot of murder. They're basically running moonshine, counterfeiting bills, and a little bit of heroin trade and opium trade. So that's fun. Perhaps the crime family could be named something like Lefse or Lutefisk. The Lutefisk bunch. Yes. Scooby says, Isidore Blumenfeld was a mobster considered the Al Capone of Minneapolis gangsters. Is that a real person, Scooby, or like part of our actual history, or is that something you just made up right now? Because that would be really interesting. And I kind of like that. Real. Okay. Awesome. I like that. The Blumenfelds. Yeah, I could definitely see that changing that. That crime syndicate is pretty unmenacing. Back in the 50s. Huh. Absolutely. In fact, I could even see the head of the family still being a Blumenfeld descendant, perhaps. Let's see. So we said that one of the things that sets the town apart from everything else is the electricity. The other thing is the defensive tower. They have a curtain wall that runs the circuit of the town. It has 4 gates, north, south, east, and west. And yeah, they are well defended. If raiders come and lay siege, it's very tough for them to actually encircle the whole town, and usually they're able to break the siege just by bringing in reinforcements from a different village or by sneaking out the back and flanking them. So it is a very well-defended town, and yeah, if they do drug smuggling, then they could be named the Newcastle Cartel. Ooh, I kind of like the alliteration on that. That's kind of cool. Newcastle Cartel, the Blumenfelds. Could actually be both. They could call themselves the Blumenfelds or the Blumenfeld family, but the town just calls them the Newcastle Cartel. Let's see. What else do we have here? Or the Palmers, after Dr. Walter Palmer, the dentist from Bloomington that was in trouble for killing that lion. You know what? I think we're going to steer clear. That's too sad. Cecil the Lion. It's too soon, Scooby. Come on. Blumenfelds. I like that better. Especially because they picture themselves more like the mob. They're not. They're like the Minnesota mob. Hey, Neophet. Thanks for joining us. Okay, so education, we talked a little bit about the sporting program. You know what, actually, we're at the 8 o'clock mark here. I like the Newcastle Cartel because leaders can be king and queen. Oh, that's awesome. That's fantastic. Oh, I really like that, actually. Sort of the Shadow King and Queen. Almost a Hellfire Club sort of thing. Yeah, you've got some really good ideas, Mika. All right. Talked about education. The students at the school get a pretty broad education, but after a few years, they actually have to pick a vocational track. So they get to choose between a few different tracks, and that'll actually decide what they're going to study, because it's not so much about having a broad liberal arts education and understanding physics and chemistry. If you're going to go work in the farms, you want to have an agricultural education. You need a little bit of earth sciences and a little bit of chemistry to understand soil and stuff. But high math, trigonometry, and experimental, integers and whatever. I'm not a math guy. I don't know. What's high math category? Calculus? They don't need to know calculus. So there's a few different tracks. The Castle Guard track essentially is the military track. They're going to go into professional military career. Generally, the students who are part of that are part of the Castle Guard Auxiliary, which is sort of like the youth reserve for the Castle Guard. You're right, nobody needs calculus. If you need and use calculus in your day-to-day life, you are much smarter than I am. There is the agricultural track. This is the second most popular one with student. The Castle Guard track is definitely the most popular. The students are usually from villages, and they wish to follow in their parents' footsteps. They are almost all part of the town's 4-H chapter. Not a lot of competition in that 4-H chapter, except internally. You can't spell calculus without us. Well, I'll have to take your word for that. Like you said, I don't know calculus. The labor track is the next most popular and most expansive, or alcohol. I don't get it. So the labor track deals with all sorts of things being made, and there's actually a new one that's kind of piggybacking off the labor track now. Like I said, the town is about to open a lumber mill. Calculus. That's a stretch. That's a stretch, Scooby. You can do better. Come on. Alcohol. So the timber track is people who will be essentially being lumberjacks or working in the lumber mill itself, producing lumber to ship up to Duluth or down to Fort Snelling. Like I said, we are at the 8 o'clock mark here, so I am going to go ahead and just recap what we're talking about here for anybody who's jumping into the conversation at this point. Hi, my name is Ryan Johnson, and I am the storyteller for After the Fall, which is a new show that will be coming here to Scryer Vision within the next couple months. And yes, definitely got it. Hey, Neofed. Glad you could make it. After the Fall takes place in the year 2030, 10 years after a magical apocalypse has completely destroyed civilization. So it is a post-magical apocalypse game set in rural Minnesota that is just a little bit removed from ours. In the moment of the fall, when everything changed, the 60% of people turned into various fantasy races. Goblins, elves, dwarves, orcs, all sorts of stuff. 40% of animals turned into various fantasy creatures, ranging from Greenlows to dragons, and creatures beyond comprehension that nobody ever wants to see. The world kind of fell apart, and the characters for the show are going to be having grown up in that world. They're 18 to 20-year-olds who are graduating from the high school in town, and on that note, they're actually part of the salvage track. They're trying to go out and adventure and find ruins of the old world to bring back and sell in town. Because there's a lot of old world relics and stuff that people who are a little older really cherish and really value. Plus, there's a lot of technology out there that still works that people really value. So the timber track, as I was saying, will be people working in the lumber mill. Salvage track, people looking to go into salvage. And the business track is for people who want to actually run a business within town. So they're part of the Chamber of Commerce. They learn the math. There's no official civil service or political track, since, again, everybody that's in the town council, that's not their primary job. They are being chosen to do this in addition to their regular job. So, there is a group of students who generally can't decide and sort of delay picking what they're going to do. And those students tend to kind of be looked down on a little bit, and it can actually reflect poorly on their family. So there's a little bit of shaming that goes along with that. And the longer a student hesitates, the worse the reputation gets within the community. Because everybody in the Newcastle community contributes. Everybody makes the town work. Everybody has a job. Everybody is working and doing something to help people. Let's see. Commerce. Oh, that's a fun one to talk about. So the economy is very important to Newcastle. Wouldn't survive without trade. There are two main business areas in town: the Market Square and Main Street. Maine is spelled M-A-I-N-E, like the state. So that'll become clear in a little bit. Market Square is by the North Gate. It was paved last year. Moving on up. It's often bustling. There's a lot of farmers that will bring carts into it and sell produce and other things. Once again, if you missed our discussion earlier, American money is still being used, but it is stamped with the official Newcastle seal to delineate that it's actually valid and can be used. So the Market Square has a number of businesses. These include Taylor's Swift, which is a tailor, a clothier. Bippity Boppity Bling, which is a jewelry store which does minor enchantments. Yes, Killer. This is gonna be fun. Guess what? I forget what they do. I actually have to check my raw notes on this one because I don't remember what they do. Let's see. Cobbler Taylor. Oh, that's the fortune teller. Guess what is the fortune teller? Griffin Wing Shoes, which is a cobbler. Beans, which is the coffee shop. Verger Cinema, which is actually a theater and playhouse converted from an old movie theater, single screen movie theater. And it's called Verger because the marquee has the word Verger permanently emblazoned on it, because in the moments of the change, there was like this lightning strike that hit the marquee, and the lights are constantly on, seemingly powered under their own some sort of spell. But what also was affected was the little plastic letters that were on the marquee at the time. It turned out that the cinema was showing a rerun of the first Avengers movie. So Verger are the pieces of the letter, pieces of the word that got stuck to it and can no longer be removed. So it's just known as Verger Cinema. They do run films there too. And that's one of the biggest things. Scavengers, if they can get their hands on actual preserved 35mm film to have movie nights and stuff for the town, yeah, they're fantastic. I would love to go to a coffee shop by the name of Beans. Just from the name, you know that it makes quality coffee. They also make healing potions. And there may be some minor enchantments in the coffee. And flavor shots. Brianna, my favorite store pun, Doing Pains, the baker. I like that. That's fun. That's really fun. Fitzwilliam Parkhurst's Newcastle Stables, also known as the Llama Place. And then Radio Shock. Yep, you're welcome. Bookseller, Bind Your Own Business. I like that too, Scooby. That's pretty fun. There is a library in town, actually, that's publicly available. So a lot of people read. There is still a very high literacy rate in the Newcastle area. Not so much in other places. So the other business district is Main Street. This is a lot of little shops and stuff. This includes the Wheel Good Salvage and Supply. Like real good? Huh? It's the main salvage company in town. The Newcastle Bakery, though I think we may have to rename that Doing Pains. The Choice Cuts Deli. Frederico's, which is the only restaurant in town. The Mariner Inn, which actually is taken over right now by the Knights of Pratchett. If you're just joining us, the Knights of Pratchett are a group of British men and women who crossed the Atlantic searching for the lost sword of Terry Pratchett, which they believed his good friend Neil Gaiman deposited in one of Minnesota's 10,000 lakes, and by interpreting clues in the Bard's journal, they believe they have found that the lake must be within the Newcastle region. And they believe that if they can find the sword and bring it back to England, it will reverse everything. Candy store, Candy Crush. There is, unfortunately... So here's one of the downsides of the apocalypse. We all like candy, but for candy, you need sugar. Definitely needs to be a haberdashery just because it's fun to say. There does. In fact, Taylor Swift does do a little bit of haberdashery work. But as I was saying, you need sugar. There's no sugar being imported right now. So the primary source of sweetener and sugar is actually from little greenhouses trying to make sugar cane, but they can't keep up with demand. And from beets. Beet sugar, which tastes a little different, but works just the same. So I hope you like those beet candies. How dare you take away candy? Well, where are you going to get cocoa from? You know what? Maybe the heroes go on a quest to the old Swiss Miss factory to get a whole bunch of cocoa and stuff. Magic. Yeah, okay. I guess. That is probably the most useful spell. Summon chocolate. Oh, dang. Somebody being able to do that would be really, really... Oh, there you go. They go to Hershey, Pennsylvania. Discover the lost magic of chocolate. I like that. Let's see. Duluth Union has also set up a salvage company and sell directly to the Newcastle people, bypassing import tariffs. And run the candy store, Candy Crush. Yes, that's the store they want to open. They want to open the Candy Crush store. Is there a butcher shop? Not specifically a butcher shop, no. But the market does have people who will bring in meat that people can buy. There's chocolate fountain hidden there. Oh, the lost fountain of Hershey. Kind of like a fountain of youth myth set in Pennsylvania. Or, wait, yeah, Pennsylvania. Oh my gosh, that's really cool. Do you want to run this, Mika? I'm just kidding. I want to run it. So, what else we got here? Oh, tech was the next thing. So, tech. Yeah, I'm always happy to have a guest on. Tech, like we talked about, there's the wind farm. Takes a lot of work to maintain it. There's also some personal solar cells that are working. Guns do work a little bit, but there's not a lot of ammunition left, and they don't work quite as well. Bows and crossbows are weirdly more effective. Actually, it's funny, Scooby, that you should mention fairies, because our next topic was actually magic, and the reason that the town is opening a lumber mill is because there is a magic forest invading from the north of town, and there are lumberjacks who their entire job is to cut the forest back, and by the next morning it's just sprouted right back up and even grown a little further, and it's taking over cropland. So they're trying desperately to chop the woods down. They have no idea what's causing it to invade like this. It's definitely magical in nature, but it may be related to fairies. So I could be the chocolate fairy. It's more useful. There you go. So yeah, the enchanted forest is invading the town from the northwest, and they're trying their best to keep up with it. Let's see. Communities like Fort Snelling have banned the use of magic within their territory. Duluth Union has embraced mages with open arms, seen them as the future. They have an excellent magic school. for gifted children and adults, but the mages are heavily monitored and kept under strict control. Mages, magic users, not outlawed. They are not outlawed in the Newcastle territories, and they're not very heavily policed. But there's a guiding philosophy that magic is just another part of life, and this is heavily influenced by the fact that wandering magicians and mages helped the community during the Goblin Wars early on in their history. Most mages join an after-hours program presented by the General School of their own free will. The councils only have to force a couple people to go. But the students who are part of that tend to be very competitive, creating new spells, showing off what they can do, pushing the limits of magic, and trying to construct new spells for the good of the community. And this is why originally we're going to use D&D. All those spells in D&D exist, but nobody has those names for them. So there's different ways to use magic that people are constantly discovering. Down the block from the school, the Lutheran Church also has an educational program for people who are learning to channel divine magic. So you have arcane being taught by the school and divine magic being taught by the church. Unfortunately, the church kind of thinks that arcane magic is sort of a apostasy. Not good. Are there any type of magic that's illegal? At this point, no. Mainly because necromancy hasn't really been heavily dabbled in. Magic has been really primarily used for healing and for... Essentially, if you know your schools of magic, evocation, kind of pew-pew magic, that definitely is out there. Divination magic. I mean, there's an entire store in the community that may or may not be a divination mage. But yeah, there's no illegal types of magic, except in Minneapolis, St. Paul. Things didn't go great there when things turned, and there was a lot of wild magic that really wrecked the place. So a lot of the structures are still standing, but most of the people have fled. And a lot of the refugees that fled, nobody knows what happened to them. Presumably, they were eaten by grus. The Knights of Snelling, as they're called, do not allow magic users to practice within their domain. They are allowed to live there as long as they don't practice, but if they're found to be practicing, they're exiled, which, unless they have a way to go, they're as good as dead. So one of the things that will often happen is when the trade barges come in with food and eventually lumber from Newcastle, they sometimes pick up people who are exiled and bring them back up to Newcastle. So there is a small portion of the population who are refugees from the Knights of Snelling. Let's see here. Any mage who joins the Castle Guard are given a chance to join the Unknown Division. Even healing? Yeah, even healing. They definitely believe more in doctors than they do in healing magic. That being said, they may not stretch the rules at times when it's convenient for leadership and for the knights. So, yeah. Within Newcastle, though, healing magic, yeah, absolutely acceptable. There are doctors still, but they kind of work in conjunction with mages that know how to heal people. Not as good of medical facilities as we have today, but hey, don't really need a great hospital if you can heal a broken leg just by touching it. Let's see here. Any other magic questions? I'm going to take a sip of this drink here before I forget, and it gets too cold to drink. Too late. Okay. Still good. Let's see here. The next topic is religion. We kind of touched on the basis that Newcastle's primary religion is the Lutheran Church. They have created their own diocese, and the person in charge is a little bit power mad and would really rather that the town, instead of being a democracy, was a theocracy. That being said, he doesn't have much power, and most people don't agree with him. There is also a Catholic church that has sprung up in an old gas station. They have lost complete contact with Rome and with any other communities of their faith, but they remain faithful that it still exists. The priest that is there is still going to practice, and they're pretty respectful to all of their faiths. Is it a holiday gas station? No, it's a holy day gas station. Okay. Neophet asks about witches. As a matter of fact, yes, there is a large faction of witches who have just arrived in town. All those Canadian elves... Actually, I don't think you were here for that discussion. We'll bounce back to that in a second. Do people believe in one god or are there many? There's a lot of disagreement about that now. People kind of follow the religion that works for them. And there's religious freedom in Newcastle, so there's a lot of little cults. Like we mentioned earlier, there's a cult that follows technology. They believe that an AI controls everything, and they're trying to salvage technology to prove this fact. It's not going great. There's a cult of Poseidon that has popped up in Fairbank that believes they are they're worshipping the river, essentially, and asking Poseidon for protection as they journey up and down the river. And as far as witches go, there is absolutely a bunch of witches. We touched on this briefly. A bunch of Canadian elves came down from Toronto because white dragons destroyed the city. Duluth kind of sent them on, but they are all pagans. So that hasn't been great for building bridges between the Elven community and the Lutheran community, as they believe they are all heretics and witches. So that's good. But a lot of the students don't really see it that way. And in fact, a few of them have started to learn sort of more of the nature magic and druidism that the elves are willing to teach them. The Red Wing Faith Consortium. They're a little further downriver. Oh, wow. I wonder... They might actually still be around trying to get the nuclear plant up and running again. Or the Knights of Snelling might have sent a little outpost over there. I could see there being some sort of strange cult over there. Witches are bad, but magic is good. Man, people love making exceptions for things. Yeah, right? The church believes that their magic is derived from their god. The witches believe their magic is derived from nature, and it turns out both are right. So, apparently, they're both able to use magic, and whatever helps them focus seems to work out for them. But yeah, there's a lot of other little faith communities within the greater Newcastle region. One of the villages actually has a mosque in it. It's part of the community that was actually made up of a lot of the refugees who came after they sent the bulk of the refugees out west to Fargo, never to be seen again. Let's see. Culture and superstition. So this was one of the more interesting parts of Spectacular Settlements. They have random rolling tables for different superstitions that the community has. And I felt like, oh my gosh, that is really kind of an interesting thing, because that really creates a more engaging community. So obviously, number one belief in Newcastle as far as cultural superstitions go, goblins and gnolls can't be trusted. They don't have any goblins or gnolls living within the community, and they kind of chase them off, really based on the fact that a couple of tribes of goblins and gnolls really early on ate about 400 people, known as the Goblin Wars, which is not a bad reason to mistrust a people when you think about it. Other one. When citizens see a single crow alone, it is customary to say, "Hello, brother crow, how is your wife?" As a means of warding off bad luck. The practice began in Pine Guard with some of the early guards, and likely has its roots in the fact that the gobs ate crows before turning to eating people. Seeing a single crow alone may have meant that its friends had been devoured, and inquiring to the crow warded off the bad luck that the next one to be eaten would be yourself. If traveling in a group, only one person must say the phrase for the good of everyone. And since it started in Pine Guard with the Castle Guard, it has spread throughout the region. You Betcha organization, name for some group. You know what? I could see that kind of being like the Lions or the Elks Club or something. The You Betchas. Other cultural note, languages. Originally, we were looking at D&D for this. Let's see. Wait. Does this mean Paul Bunyan, Babe, Bigfoot, and the Abominable Snowman are real? Oh, heck yeah. Well, not specifically Paul Bunyan, but giants exist. Bigfoot, definitely out there. Abominable Snowman, they haven't really encountered those, but the elves will tell you that yes, in fact, Yetis are real, and they encountered a number of them on their trek from Toronto down to Duluth. Fun times. What were we talking about there? Before I got distracted by chat. Thank you, chat. Let's see here. A lot of holidays have arisen within the culture of the community. There is, of course, July 4th is Election Day. There's also usually a fair that happens around that time. They kind of follow a bit of the wheel of... Sorry, I believe it was... Oh, yes, thank you. So, linguistically, in Dungeons & Dragons, you have different cultural languages for elves and halflings and orcs and stuff. And we were looking at that and like, well, it doesn't really make sense that a bunch of Minnesotans now speak Elven just because they've been turned into elves. So we determined Elven was likely some sort of Nordic language, and dwarves probably spoke German. So we kind of came up with different analogs. What's the K? I don't follow. So yeah, the languages, it's primarily English. The Toronto elves brought a little bit of French into the community. But otherwise, there are little smatterings of people who speak Spanish and German and all sorts of different things too. So, real-world languages instead of fantasy race languages. Nobody speaks Elvish, except for one person who's really obsessed with Tolkien and is trying to get it to catch on, but it hasn't yet. I have a feeling they're probably with the Knights of Snelling. There's a bunch of harvest festivals. They still celebrate Halloween. It's kind of the last big one of the year. Fall Day, the day that the fall happened, is December 21st, celebrated every year. Let's see. There is a... Oh, what's the local hockey team names? What's the name of the cup they battle for? Yes, the local hockey team is part of the sports program. All the sports teams are known as the Newcastle Defenders. I'm going to say that there are probably not really an organized hockey league system. A lot of kids play hockey. There's sort of a youth program that's sprung up that has a local boosters tournament, but it's not regulated. It's not being put on by the town. What's a good name for the UFTA Cup or something? I don't know. Chat, what do you think? What's a good name for the prize that these kids are fighting it out for every winter? Different little village hockey teams getting together. Sort of an intramural league sort of situation. The You Betcha Cup. Actually, it's got a nice ring to it. The Stanley Cup. Yeah, you know what? They actually went and got the Stanley Cup and salvaged it and brought it back, and now the kids fight over the Stanley Cup. The Lefse Cup. Ooh. That sounds more appealing than the Lutefisk Cup. Any Lutefisk fans out there? Not me. The Peanuts Cup. Oh, the Peanuts Cup. Snoopy Cup. The Pond Cup. Wyatt, that's a good one. These are all really good suggestions. I have a feeling that at least one character probably is really obsessed with getting that cup. Let's see here. The next thing on my list of stuff to talk about here is youth culture. Actually, the yet-to-be-named cup would definitely be a part of the youth culture stuff. Other bits of youth culture, we already mentioned 4-H. So 4-H definitely exists. The Castle Guard Auxiliary, which is the sort of youth military pipeline that actually gets a little bit more weapons training than non-auxiliary kids. You don't necessarily have to be going into the Castle Guard to be part of that, but it's almost an assumption. The General School Theater Club puts on 2 shows a year, and they are highly attended by all 2,000 people in town because it is hard to get good entertainment. There's a cheerleading squad and the General School Band, and then there's an official social club that is actually like a bunch of smaller social cliques that interact with each other. So the popular kids have broken up into their various groups. The Fencing Youth Club. Now, is that a group who fences youths, or is it a group of youths who fence? Yes. In fact, that is definitely probably folded into the Castle Guard Auxiliary is some sort of sword fighting or mock combat competition. Yeah. What other youth organizations do you think there would be? We definitely have the Scouts. Not necessarily the Boy or Girl Scouts of America, but the Newcastle Scouts. Snowshoe and Dog Sledding Club. Ooh. Dog sledding in a wintry area like this would definitely be a thing, I'd think. Snowshoeing probably is just how they get around when there's 4 feet of snow. And no roads. And no plows. And bad heat. With dire wolves, yes. Yep, you really are going to go far when you have dire wolves hooked up to your dog sled. I'm not disagreeing with you there. Like a dog sledding with winter wolves or dire wolves would be awesome. Toboggan sledding. You know, I could see that being a thing, especially if there is an abandoned water park that the kids have been using as sort of a gathering site. I could see them using the old slides and stuff, but with sleds during the winter. That could be kind of cool. You know, until somebody breaks an arm. But kids know how to heal each other, so there you go. Ice fishing is definitely a thing. I mean, yeah, it's part of the culture. There's also hunting seasons and stuff still. A lot of those parts of our culture, the rural culture, really kind of maintained and carried forward into the New World. So there are both boat fishing and ice fishing events. The Knights of Pratchett do not appreciate the boat fishing events, as they often prevent them from dredging lakes. But yeah, they're at the mercy of the town trying to find the sword. So okay, is there martial arts? Yes, there are martial arts. there's a couple different ways to interpret that. Martial arts can be the sword and shield fighting that we were talking about there a moment ago. But if you're talking more about hand-to-hand martial arts, that definitely still is a thing. There's probably a few people who are teaching taekwondo or karate and stuff as part of the after-school program. But it isn't as big of a thing. And there's no, like, monastery studying kung fu and incorporating magic into it just yet. Could be. Definitely probably is up in Duluth. They have everything. Very big city. Killer, can we have Canadian elves ride dog sleds and ice fish since they're Canadians? They could teach the youth about how to do both of them. I feel like the locals probably feel like they know how to do the ice fishing already, but the elves keep showing them up. But they definitely dog sled, and I could even see the Canadians having kind of brought dog sledding into popularity within the community. Let's see. Points of interest within town. The town tavern is called the Stronghold. There's bed and breakfast. The Catholic Church is actually called God's Gas Stop. And there is a newspaper in town called the the Newcastle Bulletin, not the Newscastle Bulletin, although that would be a very clever pun. Okay. Any other questions about Newcastle? Because next we've got 6 villages to visit, and we've only got about 20 minutes. So we're probably going to do another one of these in a couple weeks to go over more of this stuff. But I am really enjoying the give and take on the questions and the ideas that are being generated. This has been a really useful experience, and I really appreciate all the help. Does the culture in Newcastle value wealth or generosity? Oh, dang, Killer. That is a good question. Yes. They value community. So they realized really early on that the only way they were going to survive was by sort of pitching in and helping out each other. So people who lived in town that maybe commuted into the city for work or had jobs that weren't really a thing anymore. Like, we don't really need a lawyer anymore. We need people to work on the farms. So people kind of pitched in. When harvest time comes around, people from town actually go out and help harvest. School lets out. They pick the crops by hand because the farm equipment doesn't really work that well. And bring it back in, and they have a big festival after everything's been harvested. So community, I guess, would more go towards the generosity side of things. But there are people who value wealth in town. The business owners definitely want their businesses to succeed, and we're pushing for, instead of being a trade-based economy, being a monetary-based economy, and they got their way. So there are people who are sort of accruing some wealth now, but it's nowhere near what you would see today. Very, very good question. Made me think there. Neophet, lumberjack games, tree climbing, axe throwing, tree cutting, tree throwing, and water tree rotating. Yes, log rolling is what that's called. Yes, lumberjack games are actually part of the Fairbank Fair, particularly the log rolling. There's not as big of a community of lumberjacks in Fairbank as there are in Newcastle itself, but because that takes place early on in the summer, kind of in May, it kind of inherited that. The Newcastle Fair has more of the athletic competitions. So the lumberjack games are definitely part of the Fairbank Fair. Are all foods on a stick? Scooby, good question. No, not all foods are on a stick. It's either on a stick or it's a casserole. You can't have it both ways. Mainly because deep fryers don't work so great anymore. Air fryers do, though. Weird, right? Any Native American communities? Yes, in fact, Native American communities have done fairly well for themselves after the fall. The Sioux tribes have taken back over the Dakotas. They've taken in a lot of refugees and adopted them into their tribes. No casseroles on a stick, you say. Okay, I look forward to the results of that. Thank you, Scooby. Hot dish, not casserole. Oh, we're getting into a fight now, aren't we? Okay. But yeah, going back to the Native Americans, there's tribes that control a lot of the plains, and there's a lot of conflict between them and the civilized areas like Fargo. There is trade with the Native American communities and the sort of outliers that enter the Newcastle periphery. There's no hostility. Werewolves? Probably. But they're not telling anybody. In all honesty, yes, there are werewolves within the community. That was another reason that the Twin Cities kind of fell, was there were a lot of problems with monsters, werewolves being one of them. Right after the change, they didn't understand what was going on. Nowadays, they have a better idea, but they don't necessarily publicly live as werewolves. It's more of a familial secret that they keep to themselves. The Scout Corps of the Newcastle Guard definitely knows that there's werewolves in the area, but they tend to stick to themselves. Did we lose maple syrup? No, we did not lose maple syrup. Heck no. We just didn't really do very well with it until those Canadian elves came and showed us really how to do it right. Maple syrup is definitely one of the main exports of the community. Heading downriver to Fort Snelling, they trade a lot of salvaged goods for just a little, like a barrel of maple syrup. And actually, we probably have maple syrup candy then too. So, Candy Crush is back on. All right. All right. Other questions? Taking all questions. Liking these. Lots of stuff making me think. Raid the Cracker Barrels. Yes. Syrup doesn't necessarily go bad, so yeah, there's probably a lot of people that have picked those clean. That and like the peg jumping game. It's like the #1 board game in Newcastle. I feel like they play a lot of Dungeons and Dragons too. Honey, yes. Actually, why didn't I remember that honey is a thing? However, do keep in mind, a lot of the bees also changed into fantasy creatures. So we do have giant bees. With FFG here in Minnesota, I feel like there'd be no shortage of board. You know what? That's entirely true. There's probably a lot of board games. A microbrewery. Dire bees. Yes, thank you, Brianna. There are dire bees, and you tend to stay away from them. You let the military handle them. Microbrewery. There does need to be a microbrewery in town. Oh, gosh. I think you may have struck a nerve with some people, Brianna. I thought murder hornets were bad. Yeah, they actually shrunk. They're cool now. They're attempted murder hornets. But the dire bees, they're bad news. But the honey, mwah, perfect. Let's see. So we got about 10 minutes left here, so we're going to start on Fairbank. We've talked about it a little bit. Let's see, a group of people took over Lenny's, now control the beer trade. Oh, Liney's. Wow. I don't drink a lot of beer. So, isn't Leinenkugel's Wisconsin-based? Because nothing's coming through Wisconsin. There are a lot of there's taxes and stuff on alcohol, on spirits. And there is a lot of good water control, and water quality control, I should say, that happens for the town. So people aren't having to resort to fermenting everything that they drink yet. But, fun fact, they used to do that in ye olden times. That's why Americans drank so much beer. We didn't have clean water. Why did they get the fireworks? We should get the big booms. You know, I feel like that could be a quest, going into Wisconsin and raiding fireworks. But it's a trap. Yes. Let's see here. Big booms. Canadian whiskey. Elves brought a little bit of rye whiskey with them, and they've definitely been making rye whiskey with the crops. But the town does take a tax on whiskey sales, so they want their cut. And that seems to be a primary trade for the town, so it's bringing in a lot of income that's helping support a lot of programs within the community. I will also say that everybody has enough to eat in the Newcastle region. Nobody goes hungry because, again, everybody works. The town collects a portion of all crops and kind of redistributes them to kind of make sure nobody goes hungry. So dire bees and lots of honey, is meat a thing? Absolutely, yes. In fact, the honey that dire bees produce is considered to be much more potent. Think the space bees from Futurama. Yeah, that's the ticket. I'm making most of this up as we talk. I guess not lots of honey because less bees, but dire bees, so it evens out. Yeah, exactly. There's probably an apiary society within the community who is raising regular bees in order, one, to pollinate crops, and two, for honey. So, gotta watch out for those bears, though, because they really like those hives. Ice fishing is a dangerous sport. Dire fish or monsters fish each... Oh, absolutely. Every once in a while, people like, oh, we haven't seen Frank come out of his shack in a while. We should go check on him. They open the door, and there's just a hole in the ice. And Frank was never seen again. Nessie is real, yes. There are plesiosaurs in the lake. Loch Minnetonka. Speaking of water and stuff, Return of the Megalodon? Oh, I assume there are megalodons out in the ocean, but thankfully they are not in the Mississippi River yet. But dire sharks, maybe. Dire catfish? Oh, God. Now I'm scared. Dire muskies. So, Fairbank. You know what? We'll get to Fairbank next time. I think we're about out of time here. We only have 8 minutes left, and Fairbank has its own whole set of things going on, including a real bad ghost problem, and a little bit of a fracture within their community. Catfish are already pretty dire. Yeah, they are. I grew up in Hudson, Wisconsin, right on the other side of the St. Croix River, which is... St. Croix is kind of the inspiration for the river that this town is on. There is a massive bridge from the Minnesota-Wisconsin connection there in Hudson that has very, very deep bearings down into the river. And there's local legends that say that the divers that had to go down and set the foundations for the bridge would see 12-foot-long sturgeons and catfish and stuff down there, and 3-foot-long lampreys and all sorts of monsters from the deep, and would come up with their hair just turned completely white from fear. Yes, one fish could absolutely feed the whole village. And in fact, they do preserve the fish and sell it to the other villages and the town and ship it out down the river, too. So fishing definitely is a big part of the Fairbank experience. That's the only one of the communities that's directly on the water so far. As we're closing up here, any other questions or ideas? Open to everything. We want to make this world as real as possible, something that the players can really sink their teeth into, and you as an audience can really enjoy. And I assume that I've got probably some of the people who applied watching here too. So if you end up getting chosen, this is all information that you would probably have starting out, having grown up in this community. No secrets have been revealed. Ooh, good question. Mining and coal productions. Not necessarily for coal, but for other metals. There's a mine outside of, I believe it's outside of Jefferson, one of the villages, that they shut down production because a lot of the goods that they're getting metal from and stuff are old world salvage. You can take a car, strip it for metal, reforge it into whatever you need. So direct mining, generally not as big a thing. However, after they abandoned that mine, the Duluth Union, as part of a trade deal, said, we'll send some miners in. And you go ahead and we'll give you a cut of it, but we want to take the bulk of the resources because they're having a little bit harder time salvaging because there weren't as many big towns and cities around them to pull from. So yeah, mining is a thing. The Duluth Union has a mine in Jefferson. What happened to the Mall of America and malls in general? Excellent question. The Mall of America stands. It's still there. It's a little bit of a ruin, but there may be a quest to go to the Mall of America for something that's stored there. That the local librarian wants. So that might be a big story point, and getting there will be very difficult because it's right in the heart of the city. Camp Snoopy or Nickelodeon Universe? You know what? I think it's going to have to be Nickelodeon Universe. As much as I loved Camp Snoopy growing up, this happened in 2020. It is important. I know. I probably just made so many people mad. Maybe there is a... You know what? Here's what I'm going to say. It was Nickelodeon Universe. But there is a small tribe of people who have kind of taken refuge within the Mall of America and made it its kind of their little community. Not necessarily very nice people, probably raiders. But they have removed all of the Nickelodeon branding and put up plywood and painted Camp Snoopy over everything. They actually went out and have been like picking up the Peanuts statues throughout all of the Twin Cities and bringing them there as sort of a weird Snoopy cult that has grown up in the ruins of the Mall of America. Now that is not public knowledge, so future players and audience members pretend to be surprised when we get to it. Yes, Snoopy lives. Cult of Schultz, yes. The Schultzians. The Schultzes. And Killer, you asked about conspiracy theorists. Yeah, there's conspiracy theorists and a lot of cults and stuff. Can we have people worship Snoopy? Absolutely. That's one of the cults. They believe Snoopy is responsible for the fall. And they think if they appease Snoopy, he will return the power and electricity to them. Yay. But yes, conspiracy theorists, everybody has their own theory about what caused the fall. Some people think that, it was a government experiment gone wrong. Some people think that it was a foreign power and that the rest of the world is probably fine. And that all of this, now that I'm a dwarf, it's just a hallucination. I'm actually a human. I just think I look like a dwarf, and you think I look like a dwarf. So there's conspiracy theorists everywhere. Everybody has this conspiracy about how this all came to pass. It's all because we took away Camp Snoopy. That's what... Yes, and that's what the cult of Schultz believes. That's pretty good. I like that. But yes, the Mall of America still stands. A lot of malls, they have been heavily raided by scavengers. Since there was a lot of goods in a small place, yes. However, I will say malls are also slightly dangerous because they are kind of cave-like, and a lot of monsters, bigger monsters, have kind of made their homes there. So, you go scavenging in a mall, you might meet a Minotaur. The Red Baron's Snoopy is the cult's boogeyman. Yes, there you go. Well, we are at 9 o'clock here, so we're going to go ahead and wrap things up. I want to thank everybody for watching. I hope you had fun chatting about this. I really enjoyed this, and we will definitely be doing it again in a couple weeks here. We will be announcing the start date for After the Fall pretty soon. Definitely join our Discord server. Brianna, could you put another link in the chat for that? Oh, thank you, Scooby. I appreciate that. And yeah, we're looking forward to getting the show started. I think it's going to be really unique and really fun, and I'm looking forward to having you along for the ride. Make sure to also follow us on Twitter, and go ahead and give us a follow if you haven't already done so here on Twitch. And if you're watching this after the fact on video on demand, we really appreciate you doing that too. And feel free to hit us with a direct message on Twitch, Discord, or you can email us at scryervision@gmail.com. Again, I've been Ryan Johnson. I've been happy to have you here this evening. And yeah, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap it up there. Thanks for watching, and we will see you again very soon. Thank you, Killer. Appreciate you being here. Appreciate everybody's feedback. It was super, super helpful. And we will see you next time. Bye.